Aboriginal tent embassy activists have burned an Australian flag outside Parliament House. It follows an angry protest yesterday which saw the Prime Minister and opposition leader rush to safety. Police are now investigating that protest and say criminal charges may be laid. Indigenous leaders, meanwhile, have condemned the actions of those involved.
A day on and the anger of tent embassy activists had not dissipated. They marched up to Parliament House and burnt an Australian flag at the entrance. Earlier, they denied any violence in yesterday's protest.
There was no violence. We had the Australian Federal Police and even the riot squad waiting around the corner pushing at us in a line when we were standing there with my clapping sticks and our corroboree, our didgeridoos, our gullumbos, when we were playing them and invited the politicians to come out and speak. The Australian Federal Police came at us with force and we did not retaliate with force.
Police have also defended the way they handled the situation.
Clearly the behaviour of a number of those demonstrators was threatening and aggressive, and there were a lot of numbers of demonstrators. So we had to make a decision quickly about how best to protect the Prime Minister and maintain the safety, security and welfare of the Prime Minister, and that's what we responded to.
An investigation is underway. Charges aren't being ruled out.
I think the police did an extraordinary job. I think they did a great job in very difficult circumstances.
Tony Abbott also thanked Julia Gillard. When told she had to leave the building, the Prime Minister immediately asked about the safety of the opposition leader.
I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister and her protection detail for looking after us both so well yesterday. There was a potentially ugly situation develop very quickly, and I think by getting us both out of there as quickly as they did, the police and the protective services did a very good job.
Some of the protesters were targeting Tony Abbott specifically, who they believed had called for the tent embassy to be shut down.
I never said what was attributed to me by some of the people at that protest yesterday, and I just ask you, please, I ask you very respectfully, judge me by what I said.
Here's what he did say.
I think the Indigenous people of Australia can be very proud of the respect in which they are held by every Australian, and yes, I think a lot's changed since then, and I think it probably is time to move on from that.
For the record, Tony Abbott says he doesn't want the tent embassy torn down. He was just making the point Indigenous rights have come a long way in 40 years. Mainstream Indigenous leaders have condemned the actions of the protesters.
You know, I think people are trying to use his comments to justify their actions. In actual fact, there's no justification for their actions. They should not have done what they've done. It was a disgraceful behaviour what they've done. You know, and I know that the police are probably not going to look at charging people, but my comments, and I still stand behind my comments, that the police need to hit these people the full force of the law.
What we saw yesterday was a form of violence that I don't think anyone in Australia would tolerate, and I think that would be the view of the majority of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
The Prime Minister welcomed those comments and expressed her anger.
I've got absolutely no troubles at all with peaceful protest, and generally the tent embassy has been a peaceful protest. What I utterly condemn is when protests turn violent, the way we saw the violence yesterday, and particularly disrupting an event which was to honour some extraordinary Australians did leave me very angry. For myself, I was always very confident in the abilities of the police. I knew I'd be fine, and I was fine, but I was very angry about the disruption to an event for some very special people.
One thing the protest has confirmed, despite land rights, the national apology and moves towards constitutional recognition, some Indigenous Australians remain angry. They want a declaration of sovereignty over Australian land.
We are a sovereign people as equals. Yeah. Either you respect us as sovereign people or piss off out of our country. Yeah.
As for the Prime Minister, she says she's fine, even though she lost a shoe in the melee.
In the fortunate situation where I'm a woman with a few pairs of shoes, so I'm all OK. Thanks very much.
David Spears, Sky News, Canberra.